Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. This time, we're going to try to tackle something pretty massive.
Oh, yeah.
The U.S. Constitution. We all hear about it, but do we really know it?
Right.
I want to dig into how it came to be, who were the big players, and, most importantly,
Hmm.
how does this document, written centuries ago, still affect us today?
Big questions.
Huge rebellions, compromises, epic battles of ideas.
Yeah, yeah.
All of that went to making the nation we know. Our source material today is a fascinating presentation
Okay.
called Forming the U.S. Constitution. I think you're going to be surprised by what we uncover.
I think so, too. You know, it's interesting because the Constitution's story actually begins way before the Constitution itself.
Oh.
It starts with the aftermath of the Revolutionary War. Think about it. You've just won this hard-fought war for independence. The Treaty of Paris is signed in 1783.
Okay.
And suddenly you have this vast new territory stretching all the way to the Mississippi River.
Yeah.
It's a land of incredible opportunity,
Right.
but also one with immense challenges.
A new nation, new land.
Yeah.
But governing all that land wasn't exactly a walk in the park, was it?
Not exactly.
That's where the Articles of Confederation come in, right? Ratified in 1781.
That's right. The Articles were an attempt to create a government, but the founders were so concerned about replicating the strong central authority they had just fought to overthrow
Yeah.
that they made the central government under the Articles intentionally weak.
How weak are we talking?
Almost too weak to function effectively. They couldn't tax, they couldn't regulate commerce between states or effectively enforce laws.
So they tried to solve one problem and ended up with a whole new set of problems.
Yeah. It was a classic case of swinging the pendulum too far in the other direction.
It's fascinating how those early decisions had such lasting consequences. But then we have Shay's Rebellion.
Right.
Talk about a wake-up call. That must have really shaken things up.
Shay's Rebellion from 1786 to 1787 was a direct result of those weaknesses that we were talking about. Economic turmoil, interstate disputes, all of that was kind of simmering beneath the surface. And Daniel Shays, a farmer burdened by debt,
I see.
he became the face of this rebellion that really exposed just how fragile the young nation was.
So even though the rebellion itself was put down, it forced these early leaders to confront a hard truth.
It did. The system wasn't working.
And this leads us to the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia in 1787.
Exactly.
The birthplace of the Constitution as we know it. We had delegates from 12 of the 13 states. Rhode Island, I guess, decided to take a pass on this one.
They did. They boycotted the convention.
Oh, wow. So these delegates, they gather initially with this goal of just revising the articles, right? But quickly, they realized they needed a complete system reboot.
That's right. It became very apparent very quickly that the articles were beyond repair.
Can you imagine being in that room? All those founding fathers, the minds that shaped a nation.
It must have been incredible.
I know. You've got James Madison, the father of the Constitution. Right.
Meticulous. Brilliant. You've got George Washington lending his gravitas to the whole thing. Benjamin Franklin offering wisdom and experience.
Yeah.
And then you've got figures like Gouverneur Morris, who drafted the final wording of the document.
Right. His language, his artistry.
And Roger Sherman, who we don't talk about as much, but who played a critical role in crafting what became known as the Great Compromise.
A pivotal figure for sure. Without Sherman, it's hard to imagine the Constitution ever coming together.
It really is like a political all-star team, you know?
Absolutely, a gathering of some of the brightest minds of the era.
But they weren't there just to make history. They had specific goals. What were they hoping to achieve with this new Constitution? Well, the preamble of the Constitution actually spells it out pretty clearly. It says, "We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America."
Wow, that's powerful. And it's incredible to think that those words, written over 2 centuries ago, are still shaping the nation today.
They are. They're a testament to the enduring power of ideas and to the vision of the Founding Fathers.
But I'm guessing not everyone was thrilled with the idea of this new, more powerful central government, right?
You're right. Not everyone was on board.
There had to be some pushback.
There was. And that pushback led to one of the most consequential debates in American history, the debate between the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists.
Yes, 2 sides with very different visions for the future of the country.
Exactly. On one side, you had the Federalists, Figures like Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, John Jay, who championed the Constitution and argued for this strong national government to provide stability and unity. They believed that a carefully designed system with checks and balances would prevent any one person or group from becoming too powerful.
But on the other side were the anti-Federalists, right? Even after all the chaos of the Articles of Confederation, they were still deeply suspicious of giving too much power to a central authority.
That's right.
Having just fought a revolution against a king, I can see where they were coming from. They were worried about trading one form of tyranny for another.
They were. The anti-Federalists feared that the Constitution would trample on states' rights and individual liberties.
Okay.
And they pushed hard for a Bill of Rights, which they felt the Constitution lacked.
A guarantee of those fundamental freedoms. So you've got these two competing visions. The Federalists, with their belief in the strong central government, and the anti-Federalists, fiercely defending individual and states' rights. It was a clash of ideologies that shaped the nation we know today.
It was. And it's fascinating how this debate from centuries ago still resonates with so many issues we face today.
It really does. The tension between individual liberties and the role of government, that's a conversation we're still having today.
It is. It's a fundamental tension that's woven into the fabric of American democracy.
But back then, the very fate of the Constitution was hanging in the balance. How did they finally reach some kind of agreement?
Well, it was a long and hard-fought process. The Constitution, signed on September 17th, 1787.
Okay.
It needed ratification by at least 9 of the 13 states to become law.
9 out of 13.
And the debate raged on in newspapers, in pamphlets, and in public forums.
I bet that was intense.
It was. There was a lot at stake. But finally, on June 21st, 1788, New Hampshire became the 9th state to ratify, and the Constitution became the law of the land.
It's amazing how such a pivotal moment could come down to a single state's decision.
It is. It shows how precarious the whole process was.
But that wasn't the end of the story, right? What about the anti-Federalists and their demands for a Bill of Rights? I can't imagine they just gave up.
They didn't. The Bill of Rights, those first 10 amendments to the Constitution,
Right.
those were a direct result of their advocacy. It's a testament to the power of compromise and to the recognition that individual liberties needed explicit protection.
So we've gone from a fledgling nation struggling under the Articles of Confederation to the ratification of this groundbreaking document, the Constitution.
Yeah. It's a remarkable story.
It really is. Almost like witnessing the birth of a nation with all the drama and uncertainty. It makes you wonder what those founding fathers would think if they could see the United States today.
That's a question that historians have debated for centuries. How would those who shaped the nation's founding react to the complexities of the 21st century? Would they recognize the country they helped create?
Fascinating questions, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. We've got a lot more ground to cover in this deep dive.
We do. The Constitution is more than just a historical artifact. It's a living, breathing document that continues to shape our nation today.
That's what we're here to explore. How this centuries-old document still matters in the 21st century. We'll delve into the specific articles, explore those crucial checks and balances that you mentioned, and see how the Constitution has adapted over time.
We'll uncover some surprising facts along the way, too. I guarantee it.
I'm sure we will. So buckle up, listeners, because our deep dive into the U.S. Constitution is just getting started. Okay, so we've talked about the Constitution's origins, all those dramatic debates, and I want to get into the core principles now.
Sure.
What makes it so unique?
Okay.
I'm especially intrigued by this whole checks and balances idea.
Yeah.
It makes me think of a bank ledger, not a government.
Well, it's a brilliant system.
Really?
It divides the power among 3 branches.
Okay.
The legislative, the executive, and judicial.
So we've got Congress making laws, the president enforcing them, and the courts interpreting those laws.
Exactly.
That's the basic idea.
That's it.
But then, how do the checks and balances come in?
Well, that's the genius part.
Okay.
Each branch has ways to limit, to check the power of the others.
So no one branch gets too powerful?
Precisely. Prevents any one branch from becoming too dominant or abusing its power.
So it's like, what, a 3-way game of rock, paper, scissors?
That's a great analogy. I like that.
Each branch kind of keeps the others in line.
Yeah, so Congress passes a law, the president doesn't like it, boom, veto.
But then Congress can override that.
If they have enough votes, a 2/3 majority.
And then the courts can step in and say, hold on, is this even constitutional?
Exactly.
And the president appoints judges, but the Senate has to confirm them. It's like a carefully choreographed dance.
It is.
Everyone watching their steps.
You can really appreciate the foresight of those founding fathers.
Yeah, no kings here.
They knew power corrupts. They'd seen it throughout history.
Checks and balances, that's one pillar. What else is there?
Well, we talked about federalism earlier.
I was going to ask about that.
Go ahead.
Sounds like a big word for something I should probably already know.
It's all about dividing power
Okay.
between the national government and the states.
So balancing a unified nation with the autonomy of each state.
Precisely. It's finding that balance.
That sounds like a recipe for arguments.
It has been throughout American history.
Right, right.
But the basic idea is the Constitution lays out specific powers for the federal government,
Like what?
declaring war, coining money, regulating commerce between states.
I see.
And then other powers are reserved for the states.
Okay.
Things like education, running elections, local governments.
So like a cake,
Okay.
different layers,
Okay.
each with its own purpose, but the Constitution holds it all together.
Exactly. And just like a cake, some layers might be thicker or richer,
Yeah.
and sometimes those layers might clash a bit.
Uh-huh.
That's where those debates about states' rights come in.
Versus federal authority.
But the principle of federalism has allowed for diversity and experimentation.
50 different laboratories of democracy.
I like that.
Each state trying new things.
Yeah, it's a great way to think about it.
And the federal government provides guidance, support,
Right.
and sometimes has to step in and referee.
Exactly. To make sure everyone is playing by the rules.
And of course, over time, the balance has shifted.
It has.
Sometimes one way, sometimes the other.
Think of the Civil War, the Civil Rights Movement,
Huge moments in history.
where that relationship between federal power and states' rights was really fiercely contested.
Like I said, some recipes need tweaking over time.
That's true.
But those core ingredients, checks and balances, federalism, they've remained remarkably consistent.
Yeah, that's the beauty of it.
Okay.
The Constitution's not rigid. It's a framework, a set of guidelines that allow for adaptation, interpretation.
And that's how it's lasted so long.
Through wars, economic crises, social upheavals.
A testament to those who wrote it.
Absolutely. They created a system that could endure.
We've talked a lot about the ideas behind the Constitution.
We have.
But what about the actual document?
Yes.
Is it just a bunch of boring legal stuff?
Well, the language is definitely 18th century, very formal.
Okay.
But underneath that, there's a profound vision of government,
Okay.
a deep understanding of human nature.
So it's worth reading.
Absolutely. Worth reading and rereading, pondering, debating, because it speaks to those fundamental questions about power, about light, about the kind of society we want to create.
For those of us who, maybe don't have time to parse through all that legalese,
Sure.
what are some key takeaways, some nuggets of wisdom we should all carry with us?
One of the most important is this. The Constitution is ultimately about limiting power.
Okay.
It's about setting boundaries for both government and individuals.
So it's not about giving the government free rein.
No, it's about defining the limits of its authority, holding it accountable
To the people.
to the people.
And striking that balance.
Yes.
Between individual freedom and the common good.
A balance that has been at the heart of countless debates and legal challenges.
It's amazing to think how this document, written centuries ago,
I know.
still shapes our lives.
It does.
Makes you wonder,
Yeah.
if the Founding Fathers could see the U.S. now, all the complexities, the challenges, would they be surprised? Would they recognize the country they created?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right.
Historians, political scientists, we've been pondering that for generations.
Yeah.
But one thing is for sure.
What's that?
The Founding Fathers gave us a framework, a set of principles that has proven incredibly adaptable
Resilient.
through all the changes and challenges.
It's quite a legacy.
It is a legacy that comes with great responsibility.
We can't just take the Constitution for granted.
No.
We have to understand it, engage with it,
Right.
and constantly strive to live up to those ideals.
To keep the conversation going, to keep debating, keep reinterpreting.
It's a living document.
It is. And it's up to each generation to shape its meaning for their time.
So we've been exploring all the mechanics, the checks and balances, federalism.
Right.
But what about the reality
Yeah.
of putting those ideals into practice? It's easy to talk about high-minded principles, but things are always messier, right?
They are.
The Founding Fathers, as brilliant as they were,
Yeah.
they were still products of their time.
I'm worse.
Dealing with issues we might find,
Right.
well, abhorrent today.
They were working within the context of their own era.
Exactly. And slavery, that's the elephant in the room, right?
It is.
How do you reconcile that
Yeah.
all men are created equal
Mm-hmm.
with the reality of slavery? How do they address that?
They didn't, not fully.
Really?
The Constitution, as it was originally written,
Yep.
it contained several compromises that
Okay.
protected slavery.
Like what?
The Three-Fifths Compromise.
Oh, right.
That counted enslaved people as 3/5 of a person for representation and taxation.
So they kind of acknowledged the issue,
Mm-hmm.
but kicked the can down the road.
In a way, yes. They knew it was a volatile issue,
Okay.
and tackling it head-on could have fractured that fragile unity they were trying to build.
But by avoiding it,
Yeah.
they set the stage for what would become the Civil War.
A tragic consequence of that compromise.
It's a reminder that even brilliant minds
Yeah.
can be limited by their own times.
They can.
Those founding fathers, they had their blind spots.
All do.
And the legacy of slavery, those compromises,
Right.
they still affect us today.
They do. The conversations about race, equality, justice.
All stem from those early decisions.
In many ways, yes.
The Constitution, it's not static.
Right.
It's been challenged, amended
Reinterpret it.
throughout history.
It's a living document.
And another big issue back then was the balance of power, right?
It was.
Between the branches, legislative and executive.
Mm-hmm.
Some wanted a strong president, a decisive leader, but others worried about, too much power.
Like a king, right.
Yeah, exactly. They just fought to get rid of one king.
They had.
So they needed to find that balance.
They did.
An executive that's strong, but not too strong.
Right. That's where checks and balances come in.
Okay.
They created a presidency with authority.
Yeah.
But limitations.
Okay.
Congress controls the money, spending, taxation,
Mm.
and the courts can review executive actions,
Yeah.
make sure they're constitutional.
This constant push and pull.
It's designed that way,
Each branch vying for influence.
but ultimately constrained by the Constitution.
That's what keeps things in check.
It's the heart of our system,
Preventing tyranny.
ensuring accountability.
It's amazing. I used to think the Constitution was just this dry, dusty document.
It's so much more than that.
It really is.
It's a living testament
Cool.
to the ongoing struggle
Yeah.
to create a more perfect union.
I love that.
It's a reminder that we're always striving, always working to improve.
What makes it so
It-
fascinating?
Yeah, the Constitution is not a set of answers.
I see.
It's a framework for asking the hard questions,
Okay.
for debating, for finding solutions.
That work for our time.
Exactly.
This has been eye-opening.
I'm glad to hear that.
It's been incredible exploring the Constitution with you.
The pleasure's been all mine.
And to everyone listening,
Yeah.
keep learning, keep questioning, keep engaging.
Don't take it for granted.
This document,
Yeah.
it's not just history, it's a living legacy.
It's yours, it's mine, it belongs to all of us.
And it's our responsibility to understand it, cherish it,
Protect it.
and fight for those ideals it represents.
Absolutely. It's a constant struggle, but a worthy one.
Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.